Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sarah Platt. I'm a child nutrition consultant with the Maine Department of Education's Child Nutrition Program, and welcome to today's webinar about the triennial assessment requirement of the local school wellness policy. This training is approximately 15 minutes long, and we will have time for questions at the end. All attendees have been muted, and this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on the training section of our website once complete. If you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the chat box feature. And if I'm not able to address your question during the webinar, I will follow up with you via email. So let's get started. The wellness policy, as you're probably already aware, is a federal regulation which says that every district that has a school that participates in the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program must have a written school wellness policy. While this is a federal regulation, the policy needs to be developed at the local level to meet the unique needs of each district. The school wellness policy is a written plan that's designed to outline the ways in which the district will promote student wellness, prevent and reduce childhood obesity, and provide assurance that the foods and beverages available to students will be compliant with federal regulations. This webinar focuses specifically on the triennial assessment requirement of the local school wellness policy, but if you would like to learn more about the wellness policy requirements, we do have a training available on our website on the trainings page, and you can learn more by viewing that website, that training. The wellness policy must be assessed at least once every 3 years. So based on the July 1st, 2017 implementation of the local school wellness policy final rule, this means that the first triennial assessments were due June 30th, 2020. However, due to the current public health emergency, USDA extended the deadline to June 30th, 2021. There are 3 areas that the assessment must include. 1, how each of the schools within the district are complying with the policy. 2, a description of the progress being made in attaining the goals of the policy. And 3, how the policy compares to model wellness policies. We have developed an optional assessment tool to assist you with completing the assessment. It's designed to complement the Does Your Wellness Policy Measure Up checklist tool, which we've had for a couple of years now, and that is used to determine if your policy contains the minimum criteria that's required by regulation. The new assessment tool is designed to help you meet the 3 requirements of the triennial assessment that we just listed on that prior slide. This tool really should be completed by your wellness team as you're assessing how the policy has been implemented in all of your schools. So it shouldn't be done by just one person, but by the wellness team. You'll really need a variety of people from the committee to have input. So let's walk through the assessment tool, and it is attached as a handout to this presentation as well. So the top section is just asking for some general information, including district name, names of all the school buildings in the district, the date that you're doing the assessment, and the web address where the policy can be found online. The next section has to do with leadership. The tool asks if the policy identifies at least one school official that has the authority and the responsibility to make sure each school complies with the policy. And to that, you'll answer either yes or no. If you say no, then it means your policy needs revision, as that's a required piece. And if you say yes, you're just going to record the name of who that leader is in the notes section. The next question asks about public involvement and notification. The policy needs to allow for the involvement of a variety of people, and specific roles are identified. So as part of the assessment, you need to indicate the names of the people on the wellness committee for each of the required roles. The purpose of this requirement is to make sure there's a diverse group of stakeholders that's involved in developing and implementing the policy. It's okay to have more than the required group that is listed there, but if any of those required roles are blank, then it's probably time to reach out and do some recruiting. The next question will ask if the public is informed about the policy. Again, this is a requirement. If you answer yes, the notes section would be a good place to identify how this is being accomplished. And if you answered no, the notes section is where you would indicate what will be done to make sure this requirement is accomplished moving forward. A lot of districts will notify the public about their policy by posting it on their webpage or discussing it at public school board meetings, for example. The next section, assessment, is where you will record the progress the schools in your district are making towards achieving each of the goals listed in the policy. So you'll start by listing the goals from the policy itself, indicate if the goal is being met, partially met, or not at all. And then in the notes section, indicate how it's being met and or any additional work that is needed to make sure the goal is being achieved in each of the schools. This is where having a variety of wellness committee members will be helpful. Ideally, there's representation from each building, and committee members are already aware how the goals are being implemented, but you'll most likely also have to reach out and survey teachers or other staff in the school buildings. Either way, it's going to take a team to complete this assessment. So for example, the wellness policy may specify a nutrition promotion goal to promote fruits, vegetables, whole grain foods, and low-fat dairy products to students in each building. So through discussion with your committee members and reaching out to school staff, you'll identify ways that this has been achieved over the past 3 years, list any barriers, and any additional work that is needed moving forward. So you would record all that in the notes section. And then you'll do that same process for the physical activity goals and the goals for other school-based activities that promote student wellness. And you can always insert, if you have more goals, you can insert them, or delete if you don't have that many goals. You can delete those rows as well. So the next part is about nutrition standards. You'll enter the language from your policy about standards for foods and beverages sold to students. So think reimbursable meals, a la carte items, vending machines. And you'll also list the nutrition standards for foods and beverages that are available to students, so not sold. So think classroom parties, celebrations, rewards. So whatever your wellness policy has listed for these two types of standards, you're going to list that on the assessment form. And then again, assess if these standards are being met in all of the schools in the district. So using the knowledge from your committee, your wellness committee, and reaching out to staff, you will assess how well these are being implemented. The last page of the document asks about the food and beverage marketing language that's in the policy. The only marketing of foods and beverages on the school campus that is allowed is those that are compliant with federal Smart Snack guidelines. So your committee will assess in all school buildings if this is being followed. Consider scoreboards, vending machines, bulletin boards. Might be helpful to take a walk through some of your buildings and make sure that your marketing guidelines are being followed. The final section is about the triennial assessment. It will ask if the policy has been assessed every 3 years. And as I mentioned earlier, this requirement just came out 3 years ago. So in all likelihood, this will be your district's first time doing the assessment. And also the wellness policy will need to be compared to a model policy, which we will talk about in a minute, but you will indicate what model policy was used, and you'll give a summary of the comparison, the strengths, the areas of improvement. And finally, a copy of this assessment must be made available to the public, so you'll indicate how that will be done. And at the bottom, feel free to add any other comments or anything that you want to document as part of this assessment process. So as I just mentioned, one of the requirements of the triennial assessment is to compare the current wellness policy to a model policy. The example that USDA provides for a model policy is the one from the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, and that was attached as a handout to this presentation. You do not have to adopt this as your policy, but simply use it to compare your current policy to the language in this model policy and identify if there are areas that could or should be strengthened. It's a long document. Again, it's just to provide potential areas of improvement. And then also another resource worth mentioning is the Rudd Center's WellSat 3.0. And this is another resource that you can use to evaluate and strengthen the language in your policy. And there's a link for this on our webpage. As you work on the triennial assessment, make sure to keep documentation as part of your record-keeping efforts. It may be looked at as part of an upcoming administrative review. So by documentation, this would include a copy of the current wellness policy, documentation of public notifications, so such as a web address where the policy is listed, or copies of school board meeting minutes where the policy was discussed, documentation of the triennial assessment and that the results were made publicly available. So again, you might post the results of the assessment on your district webpage. And then any meeting notes and documentation demonstrating compliance with community involvement, meaning the methods of how the community was informed that they could participate in the wellness policy process. So for example, an announcement that was made during a school board meeting, or announcement or information posted on school newsletters or website. And another resource that may be really helpful for you as you work on your policy and the assessment of it is Let's Go, an organization you're probably already aware of, as they do a lot of statewide work with schools. But Let's Go is able to help with wellness policies by reviewing them for compliance, providing any recommendations if there's language that needs to be added or removed. And they can also help with the school board approval process if that's something that your policy still needs. They have resources also that can help with the implementation of your goals. So if you're interested, reach out to Christy. Her contact information is here on the screen, and she'd be happy to work with you. So that's a great resource for you all. So let's run through some frequently asked questions. Do we have to use the triennial assessment form from the Maine DOE CN? No, this form is available just as a sample. Districts have the flexibility to develop tools that work best for them. So it's a sample. You're not required to use this for the assessment. We're currently operating under Summer Food Service Program. Do we have to complete the assessment of our local wellness policy? So the triennial assessment requirement was effective in 2017, so over 3 years ago, and the first one was to be completed by June 30th, 2020. It was extended just because of the public health emergency to 2021, so there is an extension to that. But the requirement has been around for over 3 years now. Does the triennial assessment have to be submitted to Maine DOE Child Nutrition? No, please don't submit it to us. Just keep it on file and along with any other documentation, and then have it available during your administrative review. It may be something that we look at as part of the administrative review process. But do keep in mind that the triennial assessment does have to be made available to the public. How often does the local wellness policy need to be updated by the school board? So as long as the policy is compliant with federal regulations, then that is determined locally by your school board's process for reviewing and updating board policies. If we find during an administrative review that the policy is not compliant with regulations, then there will be corrective action to have the policy revised and approved by the school board once it's compliant. Now I'm going to check the chat box to see if there are any questions. Feel free to submit any questions you have in there. And I do see a question. It's related to the food and beverage marketing. Food and beverage marketing that in the wellness policy must state that basically you can only market foods and beverages that are compliant with federal smart snack guidelines. So the question is asking, can a school have diet soda on the school scoreboard at the high school when the district attends events there? So marketing that is smart snack compliant is allowed. So if the diet soda that's on that scoreboard is compliant with smart snack regulations, then that would be allowed. And I'm just going to wait another 30 seconds or so to see if there are any other questions that pop up in the chat box. If you have had an administrative review since 2017, can we count the 3 years from there? I'm assuming that's asking specifically about the triennial assessment. So that requirement came to be July 1st, 2017. They said between July 1st, 2017 and June 30, 2020, you must complete a triennial assessment. So that requirement isn't tied to the administrative review. It's tied to that initial timeline of July 1st, 17 to June 30, 2020, which now has been extended a year. But you had to, in those 3 years, you needed to complete the assessment at least once. And then if you did it in 2018, that's when your 3-year cycle begins. So the cycle will be fairly individual depending on when you do your first assessment, and then it will be planned at least every 3 years from then. And I'm just waiting a couple more minutes. I don't see any further questions coming in. I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes. And without any other questions, that's going to conclude our webinar for today. If you are tracking your professional standards training hours, you can use the certificate of attendance that's on the training page of our website. You would just print it off, and then you can write in your name and the name of the training, the date, and the credit hours. So thank you all so much for your attention, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions you think of after this webinar. We're happy to help. I hope you all have a great afternoon and take care.